Joan. You can find me across all platforms at Brandi Joan, and today I'm going to be showing you how to sew up my McCall's spring pattern, number M8383. And as always, that is pretty much it, so let's get to it. Okay, so the first thing that you want to do is look at your pattern packet and check out the back because that's going to give you all of your sizes and the materials that you need. For this pattern, it's pretty great. You only need one supply, and that is your knit fabric. I'm using this super soft jersey knit for mine. As for pattern pieces, you'll need your back band, cut 1, your armhole band, cut 2, your neck band, cut 1, your back piece, cut 2, mirrored, your side front, cut 1, and your front piece, cut 1. The first thing we're going to do is attach the side front to the front piece along this side seam here. So we're going to pin that wrong sides together and sew all the way down to the dot that we have marked for the slit opening. You can make your leg slit as high or as low as you want, but I'm going to make mine at what is marked on the pattern so you have a good idea of what that's going to look like. Once you have it all pinned together, you can bring it over to your sewing machine and sew it with a narrow zigzag stitch or with your serger. Once you have that sewn up, you want to make sure that you press the seams flat and open all the way down to the hem of the slit. Okay, now you can put that front piece to the side because we're going to sew the two back pieces together, stitching along the center back, leaving the curved edge free. Again, we want to make sure that we're sewing these two pieces right sides together using a 5/8 seam allowance. Now that we have our back piece sewn up, we're going to sew the back piece to the front piece right sides together along the shoulders and the side seams, again using a 5/8 seam allowance. Next, we're going to take our neck band and fold it in half right sides together and sew it using a 5/8 seam allowance. Once you have that sewn together, you want to fold it in half lengthwise so the raw edges are encased in the center and give it a light press so it holds its shape. Next, pin the neckband to the neck edge right sides together, matching the notches, centers, and the dots at the shoulder seams. Sew the neckband in place using a 1/2 inch seam allowance instead of a 5/8 seam allowance this time. Then stitch again 1/4 of an inch away from the seam allowance. Once you have that neckband sewn in place, go ahead and trim the seam allowance and press the seams towards the body of the dress. Now we're going to take our armbands and sew them the exact same way we just did our neckband, and to save time, we're also going to bring our back band over and sew that the same way. Pin the armhole band to the armhole edge, right sides together, matching the notches, side seams, and dots to the shoulder seams the same way that we did the neckband. Sew this in place using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, stretching the band to fit. Then stitch again a 1/4 inch away from the seam, the same way that we did with the neckband. Then trim the seam allowance and press the seam towards the body of the dress. Once you've sewn one armband on, you want to go ahead and sew the remaining one on the same way that you did the previous. Now we're going to pin the back band to the back opening edge, right sides together, matching the notches, center back to the upper center back seam, and band seam to the lower center back seam. Sew that in place with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, stretching the band to fit. Then stitch again 1/4 inch away from the seam allowance, the same way that we did the previous bands. And then again, press the seam allowance towards the dress. Now that all of the bindings have been sewn on, we're going to move on to the hem, which means we're almost done, which is very exciting. We're going to press under a 1/4 inch on the lower edge of the dress, baste it if necessary to hold it in place, then turn it up 1 inch to the outside on the lower edge of the dress. Stitch the hem to the dress at the left front opening edges. Once you've sewn that in place, you can bring it back over to your table and turn it right side out, which I think is so satisfying because then you have this nice clean corner. So then you're going to flip it around and finish the seam folding under a 1/4 of an inch and then 5/8 like this. Then all that's left to do is sew the slit opening in place using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you're done. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and consider giving me a follow on Instagram. Again, my @ is @BrandiJoan.